Hello, welcome to the Sport Life channel. Let's get right into it today. In this video, we're going to be talking a lot about how you should weigh, this is for Dynasty fantasy football, sickos and experts, right? We're going to be talking about how to weigh the 27 draft class and what you should be willing to part with to get some of those picks. Right now isn't really the time to trade some of those draft picks, right? If you're smart, you kind of want to think a year ahead, and you wanted to try acquire those picks back in 2025, especially when you saw some of these early freshmen coming out and dominating college football, really, like Ryan Williams and Jeremiah Smith. You knew Arch Manning was potentially going to be in that class. Dante Moore, Lenore Sellers, CJ Carr, all these guys, K1 Lacey, Ahmad Hardy. And so right now is not the time to trade. I think that time's going to kind of be around, probably starting around week 4 or 5 in the fantasy season, when early contenders start to emerge and they want to make that push to go win a fantasy championship, and they're willing to trade those 27 first. And even then, they're probably not, because they know the hype of this class coming in. And there's always a different school of thought, right? When it comes to giving up proven players for draft capital, right? And this class is it's going to be wide receiver heavy. There are some really good running backs in this class. Ahmad Hardy, Jaden Baugh out of Florida, potentially K1 Lacey out of Ole Miss. They got, the quarterbacks, obviously Arch Manning, Lenore Sellers, CJ Carr, all these guys. And I'll go into a video that kind of goes into each position group and each player and how I view them coming out. But the way they're talking about this class, it's going to be an absolutely elite, talented class. There's going to be a lot of high-end prospects, a lot of prospects that I think people are going to label as can't miss. And I think it's going to be one of those classes that when you draft that player, he's going to be immediately impactful, right? Like, I've had a draft class, right, in a dynasty league where I had the worst record in my league, and I traded for future draft capital, and I landed Malik Neighbors, Brock Bowers, Ladd McConkey. And again, maybe some of my guys weren't smart, right? Neighbors probably shouldn't have made it to me at 5. I think he made it to me at 5. I think I took Bowers at 2, and then I think I took Ladd at like 10 or something. I don't know. But the point I'm trying to get at is as rookies, they led me to a fantasy championship. And so I think this is going to be one of those classes that immediately produces high-end fantasy contributors right off the bat. You're not going to have to wait for them to develop, for them to really impact your team, right? It's a lot harder for fantasy quarterbacks to come out of the gate and be that dominant and that contributing early. I don't think this is one of those classes where the quarterbacks are going to immediately contribute. You're going to have to just wait a little bit, but I think there's some talent there with Dante Moore, Lenore Sellers, CJ Carr, Arch Manning, all those guys. They're going to be highly sought after too, but I'm mainly looking at the wide receivers and the running backs coming out. You look at some of the draft classes where you've had high-end wide receiver prospects, right? Like Chris Olave, Drake London, Garrett Wilson. Like, those guys kind of came in the league and they were instant contributors to fantasy teams, right? The class I just spoke about, Brian Thomas immediately dominated. Marvin Harrison, he hasn't lived up to the hype, but like, he wasn't a bad player his first year. Malik Neighbors, Ladd McConkey, all those guys, right? You can even go back to like Kenny Walker and Breece Hall's draft class. There were some immediate contributors there. Now, there are situations where There's guys that you got to wait a little bit for them to be immediate fantasy contributors. Like JSN, it took him a little bit before he became who he was. But then there's still some guys who get taken in the later rounds, like Zay Flowers and like even Tank Dell. You took him late, but he was immediately impactful. Devontae Smith, Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, that class, right? I think this class has as good a chance as any is that when you draft that guy, he's going to be immediately impactful. Ahmad Hardy, I think, is going to be an electrifying running back. I'm curious to see how his season develops. K'Wan Lacey, Jaden Baugh is a really talented guy that if he steps into the right situation, he's immediately impactful. There's probably not been a more exciting wide receiver prospect that I've seen coming in than Jeremiah Smith. He seems literally like the ultimate package. He can do anything. He can take a wide receiver screen to the house. He can beat you deep. He can beat you over the middle. He's savvy. He's got great skill. He's a great athlete. It sounds like he's a very disciplined, self-motivating individual. You don't really have to worry about off-the-field stuff. Like, he literally seems like the perfect prospect. Now, there was a lot of hype about Marvin Harrison coming out, and he hasn't entirely delivered on that promise either. But with that being said, I'm going to trust that Jeremiah Smith's everything we're hearing about him. And then he's got some great company with him, right? He's got Bryant Westco. He's out of Clemson. You got Ryan Wingo, who just went over to Texas. He sounds like he's going to be electric. You got Cam Coleman, came over from Auburn. Sounds like he's going to be just incredible, too. He's an athletic freak who can run like a deer, plays a true X. And, I think a guy that people are down on, but I think if you just remember as early as his freshman year, Ryan Williams out of Alabama, at 17 years old, there was the argument that he might be the best wide receiver in college football with Jeremiah Smith. I mean, he was incredible. If you remember that Georgia game, he can make guys miss. He wins contested catches, beat you over. He could do everything. I'm not going to dig too deep because, like I said, I'm going to save it for another video. The overall point of what I'm trying to get at is if you can get some of those 27 firsts, if you can now, great. I think smart fantasy managers are going to understand the value of those picks. Even picks that are assigned to teams that are going to do well, and they're probably going to be in the later part of the first round, they're still going to hold on to them, right? Fantasy season is always interesting, right? A couple injuries happen, and all of a sudden that guy's pick slips into the top 5 when you thought it was going to be picked 10, 11, or 12. It can happen that quick, right? You just want to have a shot at the lottery. Whether you have a high chance of getting a top pick or you don't, you just want to have a shot. You want to have as many shots as possible. I think the second round is going to provide some high value players. I think the second round of the 27 class is actually going to be better than potentially the late first, maybe even closer to the middle rounds of the first round this year. I didn't exactly love this class coming out. The class is always boosted by the quarterbacks, but I don't even think the wide receivers are as talented as the guys that are going to come out. Same thing with the running backs. Jeremiah Love is a pretty good running back, but then after him, I think it really drops off. And I don't think they're as good as the guys that are going to come out this year. So yeah, I think as a fantasy owner, you got to assess where your team's at. I think even as a contender, because Dynasty is all about prolonging a long run of dominance, right? It's in the name. You want to run a dynasty. So I get it, and I respect people's competitiveness if they want to trade those 27 first-round picks to go win a championship this year. I think that's quite a gamble. If I could, I'd rather trade my 28s and my 29s. If I'm any fantasy owner, I'm trying really hard by not, as much as I can, not compromise the roster construction of my team to go get some picks. And I wouldn't even trade my own. I really think this is going to be one of those special classes that when you draft that guy, he's an immediate contributor right out of the gate, and is going to heavily improve your fantasy football team. Patience is always hard, right? Especially when you're in the season and you really feel like you have a chance, and it's hard to just keep waiting. but patience does pay off. And I think this is one of those classes that if you're patient enough, it's going to pay huge dividends for the next 5, 6, 7 years of your team. But again, everybody's situation is different, right? It's hard when you're rebuilding a team. You just got some young players, so you don't want to give up young players for more young players and keep waiting. But I do think that this class is special, right? I think anybody that has those kind of players that are like 28, 29 towards the back half of their prime, I would try and trade those guys to go get some of these picks. And again, you guys see where people's opinions are at, right? Like, where do they view themselves at? How do they view the class? I think a majority of the fantasy community thinks that this 27 class is going to be special, whether it's super flex, whether it's tight end premium, whatever you want to say, right? I think they view this class very high. And I think if you have some really smart fantasy people in your league, I think they're going to be hard to give up those 27 picks because they know what's in store. Right, so that's why I was saying, like, you should, if you were looking that far ahead, you would have thought of this a year ago, and you would have invested back then. Because as you get closer to the draft, the value of those picks naturally goes up, right? So going into like this 26 draft, there's still a lot of leagues that haven't drafted yet for dynasty rookie drafts. I would heavily consider trading some of those picks for 27 picks. Even if you're in the top 5, other than the number 1 pick, right? Jeremiah Love, I think he's as good as any number 1 pick. So I'd be okay with taking that guy and not trading back. But if I'm sitting 2, 3, and 4, right? And I think naturally teams want to go get Mekhi Lemon, Carnell Tate, Jordan Tyson. I don't think those guys are as good as the class coming in next. I don't. I think that the lack of top-end talent boosted their value in this last draft. Like, I don't think Carnell Tate's a top 5 pick. They took him with the top 5 pick because they needed an X-wide receiver for Cam Ward and to give him some help on the outside. Took a really talented Ohio State wide receiver. You really can't go wrong with that choice. But you look at the kind of players that are taken in the top 5, top 6, I don't think he fits that bill. Like, I don't think he's as talented as like a Julio Jones or a Calvin Johnson or a Jamar Chase or any guys that you want to think that were taken in the top 5. I wouldn't have done it. Now, again, like, lack of top-end talent pushes those guys up in people's rankings. But as a fantasy owner, like, see if you can really get a haul of picks for the number 2 pick. See if you can kind of swindle somebody out of that for Carnell Tate. I would consider it. Again, same thing, 2, 3, 4, and 5. See if you can get those picks, right? Some people get really draft eager and they get excited for the draft and they might overpay for like pick 7, 8, 9, 10. And maybe you can get a 27 first next year and maybe get other draft capital on top of that. I don't know. You got to see where your league's at. But as a dynasty owner, I would have the patience to pass on 26 and try and get some capital for 27 as much as I can. Even if that means bundling players with picks to go get some of those picks, I would do it. Going into this 26 season, and then again, evaluating the landscape of how your league's doing, and then going from there and making some necessary moves. So, as I'm saying this, it's a lot easier said than done. It takes a lot of negotiation, takes timing, right? Like, a lot of with trades is timing. Like, when do you go do a move is as important a factor as anything, right? Whether it's capitalizing the stock of a player, right? Or capitalizing on where that team's at in the season to see how available that pick is, whatever the case is, whatever trade asset you're trying to get, right? And so again, as we go further into this season and further closer to the 27 draft, you have to judge those moments. When is the right time to strike to go get some of these assets? And like I said, I would consider trading. I don't think any 26 pick is safe outside of 1-1 to get Love. I think Carnell Tate's going to be a really good player. If I can go get multiple 27 first round picks for Carnell Tate, I would do that. I would do that. Same with Jordan Tyson, Makai Lemon. Like, I just don't love this class. I really don't. I think Tyson and Lemon probably go in the later first round of dynasty drafts. If they came out in the 27 class, I think Tyson and Lemon go in the later round of the first round. I truly believe that. I think this 27 class is that much more talented going in. And it's just, the recency of where we're at now that boosts the value of guys like Tyson and Lemon into this draft, because it's just right now. And, there's not as much talent competition for them to go against. And same thing goes for Carnell Tate. Same thing goes, honestly, for Kenny and Sadiq. Same thing goes for Casey Concepcion. I don't think Casey Concepcion's a first-round fantasy pick. I wouldn't feel great about it. Denzel Boston. You could throw any name you want out there that came out of this class. Zachariah Branch. Any name, really. You got to see my terrible hair. But I would try and trade those picks as much as I could, right? And because as we get closer and as the college season starts playing out, and the college season is going to do two things. It's either going to raise a player's value or it's going to lower it, right? And, we saw like this 26 class was actually supposed to be quarterback heavy. Well, a lot of those guys didn't perform well, like Drew Aller and a lot of the players that we thought were going to be good. Garrett Nussmeier, we thought he'd be better. We thought Arch could come out in this class. Dante Moore potentially could have came out in this class. And either they underperformed or they're waiting a whole another year to come out. And so college seasons can change draft stock in player values as much as anything, right? But if these players turn out to be as good as I think they'll be, I think their stock's only going to go up. And I think people are going to be less and less and less likely to trade their picks because they want to have a shot at those guys, because they're going to see how supremely dominant they are. And the hype's only going to build on them coming out of college. And, I think it's going to be one of those special classes that will develop all by itself, and it'll reveal itself to all Dynasty fantasy owners. So it'll be something to watch going forward. All right. Thank you very much for watching this video. Hit like and subscribe, and good luck into your fantasy seasons. We got some more stuff coming out. And as always, hope everyone has a great day. See ya.